Okay. You can also type last if you're on an open network, like school, college or whatever type of network, to see the last user that was logged in. This is also useful if you're connected to a remote computer and you want to know other usernames, for example. You can type last and it tells you who was last logged in. As this happened, it was root because it was me who was last logged in. But if this was another user, it'd say so here and when they were last logged in. Okay. Another useful command if you're connected to a remote computer, or again if you're on another computer and you want to know what the last person who was logged in did before you did anything, you can type history to see the bash history. As you can see, these are all the commands that I've been going through. Everything I've typed in the order I typed it. That's quite an handy thing to know, history. Clear my screen. Okay. I'm just going to go through a bit now of user management. If you want to add a new user, it's really quite simple. User add and whatever name. That would add a new user called new guy. After I press enter, it asks me to enter the password from. Okay, quite simple really. Now, if you wanted to change or reset a password for any specific user, presuming you have higher rights than that user, of course, unless it's yourself, which you can do with this command, and you type pass wd for password and the username, say user 1 if there was a user called that, which there isn't, but it asks me for their password and then the new password. Or if I'm say I'm root and I want to change a normal user's password, it wouldn't ask me for their password even, it just asks me for a new password for them. Okay, that's how you change password. You can do it for yourself as well. You can delete a user by del user and the username that a del user too. That's a bit on user management, at least the basics. I should really also mention some commands working with archives, such as zip files, RAR files, etc. If you want to unzip an archive, it's a zip file. You'd simply unzip and the file name. Simple as that. Likewise, zip and a path would zip up everything there into a zip file. If you wanted to search a zip file, you can actually type zip grep and whatever you're searching for. Say I want to search for wildcard text, any text file within file.zip. Okay, that's how I search for text files within file.zip, zip grep. Quite simple. Now, if I want to extract from a tar file, it's simply tar extract files xf and the name. Okay. If you want to extract from a tar bz2 file, it's tar extract jf and the name. Like that. So to extract from bz2 file. I think I can hear someone singing out the window. Okay. Yeah, if you want to extract from a tar gz file, it's tar xf vf and the name. Like that. And if you want to extract extract from a gzip, which is gz. It's simply gzip -d or tac d for decompress, and the file name like that. I'm going to tell you that singing person. Okay. Now I should mention, if you want to zip up a directory, you actually need to add tac-r for recursive, just like the remove command. Oops. That'll zip up my root directory. So it's recursive. There you go. For tar, and you put cf for compress file instead of xf for extract files. Compress files. The file name you want to make, this is for making a tar file, and the path you want to compress. Keep doing that. And wildcard for every file in the root directory. So I'll basically create a file called file.tar from every file in the root directory. So that's tar, compress, file, cf, the file name you want, file.tar, the path, wish star for all the files there. Okay. If you want to create a gzip file, gz, it's gzip and simply your path. Again, we'll start for wildcard all the files in my root directory, put into a gzip file. Again, I can put a name if I wanted. Okay. That's how you work with archives. It's actually pretty straightforward. You'll mainly be dealing with tar files and zip files, and tar gzip. Sometimes tar bz too, but not as often. Okay. Okay, if you want to type out, if you've got a file and it's got no extension, and you say you're not exactly sure what file type it is, you've used cat on it, and it shows you a lot of jumbled text, so it doesn't indicate what type of binary it is. You can use file and whatever name it is of the file, and it'll show you what actual file type it is. Always useful to know. If you want to disable your bash history, say you're doing something on a computer and you don't want the admin to know what you've been doing, you don't want them to be able to type history and know what you've been doing, then you can actually type unset and in capitals history file. That means you can do something on the terminal and there'll be no history of it. You can actually connect to a remote desktop session from Linux, which is a Windows thing, with our desktop and the IP you're connecting to. For example, it uses a default port in that case for RDP, which is the remote desktop process in Windows. If you wanted to convert a base64 text, which is a web app encryption format, if you wanted to convert that to normal text, you do base64 tac d, and then the input. Say you had a base64 string in a file called input.txt, and then you could output it, say, to another file.txt. That would put whatever the base64 was, it would unencrypt it and put it in file.txt. You could use echo and the base64 string and pipe it to base64 tac d to display the decrypted string on screen, for example. Another use of the pipe. Probably an easier way of doing it, actually. Okay. Those are all the command I can think of without getting too complex that the basic commands that I use quite often. At this moment, I just want to, I really should mention GCC as well. GCC is a command, it's basically the new compiler. You can use it to compile any C code, which you'll be using a lot when you start getting into exploits, special buffer overflow and stack overflow exploits. I will be doing videos of those on much later date. So that's GCC, it's basically a compiler. And taco for output, whatever you want the file to be named. There are some programs you may download that will require you to compile them, and you do it this way. GCC taco for the output, you name whatever you want as the output file, and then you simply put the C file. So that will compile file.c into output. Output will be a binary that can run directly. So it's basically a compiler. GCC. If I was on, as I'm on a 64-bit system, say I wanted to compile it as a 32-bit binary rather than 64-bit, if I ran that, it compile it as a 64-bit. But if I wanted to specifically compile it as 32-bit, you add tac m of 32. That'll compile it as 32-bit, even though I'm on a 64-bit system. Likewise, if I was on a 32-bit system and I wanted to compile it as 64-bit, I'd do tac m64. Otherwise the rest of the command the same, taco and the output and the file, the C file. Okay, that's how you use the GCC compiler. Pretty simple. Okay, those are the basic commands which you'll be using. I just now want to quickly cover the permission system. Now if I just run ls, let me go back to my root. Now if I run ls in long format, you see on the left hand side here your permissions. Okay, now ignore the first letter, that specifies whether it's a directory, a file, or a Linux file system file, which is DL or blank. It's the other 9 we want to concentrate on. Now you'll notice they're in sets of 3 sets of 3. Okay, now they're all, you notice it's always RWX, that's read, write and executable. Okay, now the first group is the owner of the file. That's the permissions that the owner has on this file. He can read the file, write the file or execute the file. The group's permissions, they can only read and execute it, but they can't write to the file. And the last group is any other user, and they can read or execute it. Okay, that's what the groups mean. They're put into 3 sets of 3. So it's the group's permission, the owner's permission, sorry, the group's permissions. So if the owner belonged to the admin group, for example, this would be their permissions, all of the people in the admin group, and this is any other user. So owner, group, any other user. Now as you notice, each set of 3 has 3 sections, which is read, write and executable. Now if you imagine each one of them is allocated a number. Read is allocated 4, write is allocated 2, executable is allocated 1. Now if you want to make up the permissions, you add whatever permissions you want. Say I wanted to just allocate read and executable, which is RWX, remember. So I wanted to allocate read, which is 4, not write, but I do want to allocate executable to a file. So that's just 4 and 1. Read 4, executable is 1, write is 2, and I don't want to allocate that, so it's just 4 and 1, which is 5. So my first number would be 5. I believe there's an ice cream man outside. I can handle an ice cream actually, but never mind. Now that's for the group. You do exactly the same. I mean, that's for the owner. You do exactly the same for the group. So say I want to give them the same permissions, and then for the user, say I don't want to give them any permissions. So So that'd be 550. Okay. So in all permissions, if I want to give permissions, every permission to the group, to the owner, to the group and the user, that would be 777. That's giving every permissions. 755, remember, so that's 7 to all of them. 4 and 1, so that's just read and executable for the group and the user, that's 755. Okay, now we know how the numbers work. To allocate permissions, you use chmod and whatever number. So we want to give all permissions 777 to this file. As simple as that. I'm sure you've seen chmod before and seen it with numbers, but not exactly knowing what was going on. That's what it is. It's basically allocating permissions. Chmod allocates permissions to a file or folder. So the owner group is allocated 7, which is 4, 2 and 1, which is every permission. The group is allocated exactly the same, 4, 2 and 1, every permission. And any other user is allocated 7 as well, which is 4, 2 and 1, every other permission. Okay, I hope you understand that. It's pretty essential to know the permission system. But I did want to cover that quickly.